today I'm going to be demoing kind of the last few steps that you're going to need to complete this project. It's going to be a lot of information, just take it in as you can. That's why we're doing the video, so you can always refer back. You can also always ask me questions. So I wanted to start with this up, so you can kind of get a sense of what things look like from a distance. Sometimes, I tell you, you're always like right on top of your project. As you can see, as you step back, when you get up close, it's like, wow, this is like kind of heavy and what's going on. But as you step back, you notice it already starts to kind of pull and push and look at least something like wood. And again, remember, like if it's in the context of a show, oftentimes wood is also usually on the floor. So we get that kind of view as well. But I wanted you guys to stand back and see, this is eventually where we're going. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to show you graining, shaping, and sealing. All right, those are kind of the last few steps. And then you will have a beautiful wood project that you can be totally proud of and be like, yeah, I did that. So the next step, we've already done the wash, we've done the scumble. Next step is going to be the graining. Graining is actually one of my favorite parts. It is kind of the part that actually makes it look like wood to an extent, because right now it just looks kind of stripy, but as you can already see, like when you lay down a grain, it makes it super, super lovely. Now, something to bear in mind, I'm showing you guys a certain process to get us where we need to be for this particular elevation that I need. But know that, and this is true for any scenic art thing, there's no right answer. The answer, you will work with 4 different scenic artists who will get you to a place in 4 different ways with the same elevation. This is just one way to do it. There are so many different ways to do wood graining. So just kind of bear that in your mind that even though we're practicing it this way, and this is how we're getting the result in this case, the only answers are which is going to be the most efficient, take the least number of steps, and look exactly like the effect you're trying to get. So, next step is our graining step. Very important to watch directionality. This is where if you put it in the wrong direction, it's going to look weird. Now, most of the time it's pretty self-explanatory. The only place to really watch it are on these triangles, okay? Because most of the time, it makes sense which direction you're supposed to go. Now, you're going to have your graining color, which is basically just color with a little water for movement, and then, ooh, that water was cold. Okay, wake you up. And I would say have, again, my dear friends, THEA sponges in your hand. Now, thing to be a little bit cautious with. These are a little bit drippy. Make sure you squeeze out and kind of dry out, because if you drip little spots on your board and you miss it, it will create spotting in your graining and sometimes even all the way through the wash, because these are water-based paints. So just try and be mindful of that. We have, in this case for our graining, we're going to be using all kinds of graining brushes. I don't have a lot of these. I have some 4-inchers as well, but do your best. Please, please keep track of these, and also we're going to have to share among each other. But again, if you don't have a lot, do keep track of these. So these are just nice chip brushes. These are chip brushes cut up. They totally work. And basically, kind of have your sponge sort of on hand. So let's see. I'm going to do that board. Just kind of dip. Again, don't necessarily need much. Nice thing about graining brushes, they'll kind of do the work for you. And you just gotta sort of go in and you just give a little drive. You don't have to put much pressure, and kind of play with it. Play with what happens when you add a little more pressure, when you add a little less. And again, you want to kind of bring it up to the edge as much as you can. You can always wipe off with the sponge, but you just don't want it to look too start-stop. Does that make sense? You want to make it look like this was, think about what it was. It was one big long board that got cut out. So that is the goal, is to make it look like that. And again, vary the strokes. That is the one thing with graining brushes you got to watch out for, is sometimes they may look a little even, but we're about to mitigate that with our sea sponge. So take the sponge, you can kind of drag it through. You'll see, again, it keeps kind of that sort of stripiness, and you can leave some a little more distinct, some a little not. You start it in the middle. They kind of vary the board a little bit that way. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you again on a lighter board so you can see what it looks like with a little heavier contrast, because that was a pretty dark board. I'm going to use the same brush. We do also have, we have a few different kinds. So again, play with it. Get a little into it. Graining is very forgiving. It's very easy to wipe it back, push it back, whatever you don't like. So again, just kind of keeping in mind, like different pressures. Like sometimes I'll lift, sometimes I'll only use. And if there's like a little warble, that's okay. Because remember, think about how wood grain works. Think about how your material works. It's not always straight. It was definitely once a living thing that we have killed for our pleasure. So this definitely has some motion. It can have some variation again. And just play with making sure it doesn't get too starting stuff. You can always do a little bit more, a little bit less. And there we go. So I've got that. And again, we also want to be careful we don't overdo it, because as you can see, it can sometimes shift, it does shift the value. It shifts that light and dark. So again, just kind of take the sea sponge and just go in. Doesn't have to be always a really long pull, it can just be a little one. Leave some areas alone, nice and dark. And again, might pull it up here so that it looks like we had some pull. And voila, we have some graining. And again, especially with the light boards, definitely my temptation is I want to get really crazy and overdo it with the graining. Don't do that. You really want to leave some bright spots. And again, look at your elevation. Look at it's like, oh, there's definitely some bright spots. So when it's got a little, that, you know, peel off your sponge, see, exactly like that. If you do get little drips, just try and pull them out with your brush or with your sea sponge. Like if it gets on your thing, just try and pull it through. That makes sense. So I want to make sure that stays a little brighter and that stays a little brighter. All right, so that's number one. That's graining. Comments, questions, concerns, thoughts that are pertinent. Great. Okay, your next step is going to be shaping. Next, right? Yes. So shaping is basically, I've made a wash, and you know I talked a little bit about washes and glazes. This is a wash we kind of want to behave like a glaze. All we're trying to do is get a little bit that deepening. See how the guy, like in the center, like where it joins, how it's a little bit deeper? That's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to push those connections to look just a little bit deeper, so we get even a little more motion, a little more value. You don't need a lot of it, and on the boards that I've already done, you can see like this one, how they have just a little more depth up in their like top areas. That's what we're going for. So just this mixing stick, fine. It's very, very watery. Please be careful with splashes, because it is basically a very, very, very thin wash that we're using like a glaze. We're just trying to tone an area of the board. Now, I'm gonna use this brush. I'm gonna use this brush. These guys, basically, these are just I call them by their brand name. That's Purdy's, also known as like satins or liners or whatever. These are very soft. They have a much better fill. These are not so much these, but these are expensive brushes, and they're going to apply this very smoothly. So you're basically going to have one of these. You're going to have a 2-incher that you're just going to use for water. This is all I got of these that are in good enough condition for this project. And you'll notice a number of them have my initials on them. Please keep track of those, because if these start disappearing, you guys are going to have to buy your own. And we want to avoid that at all costs. So basically, I'm going to use this one, you know, not a terribly crazy brush, but you basically have your 2-inchers already going to have some water in it. Also, again, keep that sea sponge on hand. This is going to be a little fiddly. Take your time with it. It's not something you need to rush. So let's go ahead. We're going to tone that board. It's going to look really thick when you first lay it on. And you don't need much on the board again, so it's going to stretch. So you just lay it on nice and smoothly, this brush, and then you're going to come through with your chip. Ever so slightly, just kind of pull it down. Now let's say I pulled it down a lot and I'm like, ooh, I don't like that dark there. Kind of gently with your sea sponge, sort of go in, and you can wipe it back even more. But do you see how it's already kind of letting that grain through? But it's going to tone the board. Be a little more shapely in that area. And again, you can always go back and put more, but it's very hard to take away once you've put too much. So use sparingly, let it dry all the way, be totally good. Okay, so that's kind of your shaping. And again, you'll see the way that it's in the elevation, it's all up where these boards join. That is consistently where you want it to be a little bit deeper. And just watch yourself and make sure you're kind of varying things that are next to each other so you don't lose that value, okay? Shaping, good. Comments, questions, thoughts, great. All right, so last step. Okay, so your last step, well, technically, okay, so second to last. We're gonna include this, we're gonna include this. I found a couple of yardsticks that are straight edges that actually have straight edges. Again, so I'm only able to find these two. I'm trying to get you guys lining sticks, but for now, we'll use these. So I'm actually gonna come around that way. Can I just shift? Okay, so basically, you're gonna put in the lining. I recommend doing this all in one go. It's just very much what you think it is. I'm gonna shift that. Basically, line it up. Again, there is gonna be some sink, there's gonna be some bounce. Do the best you can. Just try and make sure it's square. Flat edge of your chisel. And again, nice and easy. Just do that. You want it to be a nice, thick, even line. So you've done that. We're just gonna go ahead and make sure. Also, I would recommend doing as long a pull as possible so that you have all in the same line. So you don't do what I just did. It'll be fine. So this is actually going to be your final lining tonight. You can see it's already looking really straight. I know it's been a little like, things aren't quite lining up. You've had to do a lot by eye. This is the step that will mitigate all that. So, and would you be a dear and hand me that, this one? Oh, actually, nope, you're right. That one. Thank you.
My intuition, bro.
You were correct. Listen to your gut and then consider it. Okay, so we are then going to do a sealer. You almost always, especially for stuff like wood, almost anything else, you're going to put a sealer on. Walls and things like that, like when you're just painting walls, you don't always have to. But especially for something like wood or floor or stone, you definitely want a sealer because the sealer is basically that kind of that final kiss, that final thing that pushes it from looking like, okay, kind of nice and painted to like really nice. Now, we are using today, stinks a little bit. It's called Minwax. It's a water-based polyacrylic satin finish sealer. Now, a lot of sealers are polyurethane. Polyurethane is not water-based, it is oil-based. And I avoid it at all costs unless absolutely necessary because it is stinky, it is toxic, and while it looks beautiful, it is just, will fumigate everything, and it's not water-based, gets on your skin. Basically, try to avoid polyurethane. So we try to use water-based polyacrylics. Now, Minwax, pretty decent product, not too expensive, and it does the thing. There are a couple other products that I prefer using more, but just again, dreaming on a budget. Polyacrylic, again, it's water-based, a little bit of a funk, but no one here is like, oh my God, I'm dying. It's because, but just know, try to use it in a well-ventilated area, don't hold it too close to your face, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the thing about sealers, they dry fast on you, so you really want to get nice, quick, efficient, smooth strokes. Also, it is a satin finish. Always check your finish. I prefer for wood, almost anything, I always prefer a satin, because a satin, you can see it in this board a little bit that I've already done, has a tiny bit of a shimmer, but your lighting designer is not going to kill you because it's a gloss. So, the satin gives a little bit of lift, a little bit of shine, and especially most wood floors have a little bit of lift and shine. And the other thing to be mindful of, you usually want to apply sealers with a brush of some kind. You can roll them, but you gotta be careful because sealers can cloud. Never put a fan on a sealer because that can cause them to cloud, and you don't want to go over too many times with your strokes. That can cause them to cloud. Or if like I was telling you guys, you want to make sure you're nice and smooth and even. Again, another thing that will get them to cloud is if there's too much buildup. So, working with a sealer, nice smooth brush, quick, decisive, even strokes. And I always say shift around in the light as you're doing it because it's very easy to miss a spot with a sealer because it's a clear coat. So, got that on the brush and get your brush nice and juicy. But again, you don't want to leave too much. You want to make sure you pull out everything nice and even and smooth. And again, kind of keeping it quick. Make sure what you've laid down you pull out pretty quickly because like I said, this will dry faster than you think. So just basically you're gonna pull it along your board, nice and gentle, nice, and also be a little bit simpler for you guys because you'll have already marked everything. I would say make sure still go board by board. Because again, thinking about how this would actually be if it was a real thing, these boards would have been laid separately. So the sealer, again, can help you with that. I wouldn't recommend just doing over. And that'll also help it not dry on you because you'll have nice, even sections. See, I've already missed a spot. Because this is not going to want to take up the sealer at the same rate. Okay, there you go. And you can already see sealers also will shift the color just a hint. You can see like this is already deeper than that. It's like just this bare touch, but bear that in mind when doing things. Always kind of account for what the sealer is going to do. Okay? So I think we're good on that.